What day is it?
It's my birthday.
It's good to share. But check you have the right privacy settings. Or someone can make a lot of money from being you.
Welcome to the Politics People. My guest today is legendary journalist, author, broadcaster, commentator. I'm talking today to Peter Hitchens. Good morning.
Morning.
Are you aware of the influence that you've had over the last few decades on British politics? And
well, yes, I've had absolutely no influence at all.
See, I see. Maybe I'm just a super fan, but I think that your presence on the platforms, on broadcast platforms that you've had for the last 20 or so years have had a huge impact on voters and voting behaviour and the mood of the country. But you don't see that at all.
No, I can't. It depends what you mean by impact. I mean, none of the things which I desire to change have changed as a result of my efforts. The research that I put in has made no impact at all and is not listened to or acted upon by any government body or even political party. I think of several areas: education, policing and crime and justice, and the question of drugs, for instance, on which I've spent a great deal of time and research and published books. And I might as well, books which in some cases I pressed on ministers and senior officials and put into their hands, so I know they've had the chance to read them. But for all I've seen as a result, it's made no impact. So and also on other journalists, I can't open a newspaper without reading something saying, well, let's have more police officers. And I keep explaining over and over again, you could have a million police officers. It would have no effect as long as they continue to do the wrong thing. And it doesn't, and I've produced over and over again figures showing how when the police were more effective, there were fewer of them, both per head and as an absolute figure. And I might as well have saved my breath. I'm told repeatedly that the war on drugs was failed. I established years ago there had been no war on drugs in this country over the past 40 years, rather the reverse. But I might as well not have written it. And I can show over and over again the advantages of having academically selective state schools. But there is no serious move towards that, just the occasional gimmick. I'm still confronted by people who argue, oh, well, because the tiny remaining number of selective state grammar schools aren't good examples of allowing the children of the poor in, then that would mean that a national system of the same kind would work in the same way. It's just obviously wrong. But I might as well not have written or said a word or syllable that I have spoken. The whole thing, as far as I'm concerned, has been a complete and utter waste of time. And what is the point of writing about major issues if it has no impact upon policy whatsoever? What is the point of research if it doesn't enter into the minds of the people who need to use it, who continue to believe things which are demonstrably false? And they believe them because it suits them, I believe. I don't think they're unaware of what I'm doing. I think they're just not interested. The suggestions I make would involve some difficulty and some unpopularity and some hard work, and people don't want to do that. So there we are.
In the party political machine, and just generally in life, we can't choose the influence that we have. But don't you see any correlation between your stoic presence for the last few decades and the rise of the Melanie Phillipses of this world, or David Starkeys?
Well, Melanie and I are completely opposed to each other on so many things.
But on issues, I totally, on policy, I can see that. What I'm saying is that I remember a very bleak time when the battle had been completely lost and there were no common sense voices brave enough to take on.
When was that?
I'd say the mid-'80s, leading up to Blair in 97.
Well, yeah, but the thing about the mid-'80s is because the Cold War was still on, and we lived as a result in a fool's paradise. And as it happens, when I think back over that time, I don't have any great nostalgia for it because it was a fool's paradise. But all kinds of things which are now pretty much heretical were then more or less consensual. People genuinely believed, for instance, that communism was a bad idea. National defense was a good idea in most cases. And economic policy was at least based on the idea that you shouldn't actually wreck your economy as a matter of public policy. And the fanatical egalitarianism, which has now been extended to the universities, was far weaker than it is now. And you could speak much more in dissenting terms, whether it be on the issues of the sexual revolution or anything else. There wasn't this awful atmosphere of, oh, if you say that, you'll lose your job or be driven from public life, which makes people simply shut up now. And it was still more, I should say, probably more formally a Christian society as well. Not because Christianity was much stronger, but because the end of the Cold War brought in this terrible blast of freezing clean cold air into what was really a sort of mummy's tomb, and everything that had previously seemed certain and solid collapsed. But the thing was that a lot of people thought, oh well, the Cold War having been won, we've defeated the communist menace. But in fact, the reverse was true. In fact, Marxism was liberated to try again, as it has been very actively ever since. But I cannot get anyone to see this. And I go on. I point at the extraordinary, the amazing revelation by himself that Blair himself was a Trotskyist, which if it had been made before 1997 would have been a million-volt Fleet Street story and would probably have cost him the election. It came out on a Radio 4 program a couple of years ago, and nobody even noticed it apart from me. The numbers of people in Blair's cabinet who were supposed to be ex-Marxists, not that any of them ever made any particular profession of having given it up. It's just they kept quiet about it. And people say, well, what about you? And I say, well, yes, of course I was a Trotskyist, and I've always been frank about it. And I tell people when I was and when I left and why I changed my mind. You look at these people, they're terribly embarrassed about being asked because they remain in spirit revolutionaries, and that's why they went into the Labour Party, and that's what they intended to do. But they understood that revolutions weren't about storming the Winter Palace with bayonets and fur hats on. They were about seizing control of the television studio and the school and the newspaper and changing the culture and the morality of the country, which is what they've very successfully done. And people still to this day tell me that the Blair government was right wing. And they laugh when I suggest it was anything otherwise. And hopeless. I'm standing there. You've seen the original version of the invasion of the body snatchers, where the hero, he knows what's going on, and no one will believe him. I can't tell you it. If you ask me these questions, this is about the only way there is of making me actively furious, because you remind me of the enormous amount of effort which I've expended on trying to rescue a civilization from suicide and getting absolutely nowhere at all. Most of the time I've reconciled myself to this, but you just reminded me.
Look, I apologise if it's
No. It's not your fault. It just is the case. I mean, don't tell me I've been successful. That's all I ask.
Well, all I'm saying is like, look, it may even be beyond our lifetimes, but I'm saying that you might feel that it was a futile act up to this point. But I'm saying without your presence, this argument wouldn't have even been on the radar. The whole.
Well, so what? If nobody pays any attention to it, so what if it's on the radar?
But you're steeped in it. And but most people aren't. And I'm saying that it's more like turning around an oil tanker. You're trying to take an entire culture. There's been a semi-revolution.
Well, okay, but I've been trying to turn around the blinking oil tanker for 20 years, and it hasn't shifted its course by a single degree.
You don't think the rise of,
if anything, it's increased speed towards the reef towards which it is steering with such enthusiasm.
We might not end up with the utopia. I agree, but do you not think that rise?
No, I'm not a utopian. I'm not interested in utopia. When I originally wrote my first book, The Abolition of Britain, I genuinely thought that if one drew attention to the nature of the Cultural Revolution and its direction, that it might be possible to turn people away from it, and also to get intelligent people on the left to understand that they were not achieving the consequences they'd intended, and to give them the credit of believing that their motives were good, and that therefore if they saw that their good motives were leading to bad results, then they should reconsider them. Nothing of the kind happened. I continued to be a pariah. The late Sir Roger Scruton pointed out the difference between the left and the right. If he disagreed with people, he just thought they were wrong. But if the left disagree with you, they think you're bad. And they do. They think I'm wicked. And my access to wider media, I'm terribly grateful to the newspapers, particularly associated newspapers, which have given me the platforms that I have. I'm unbelievably grateful, because without them, where would I be? But the other platforms which would help me to reach audiences beyond that, the publishing of books or getting onto broadcasting, they narrow all the time. My books used to get reviewed. Now they don't. I had a tremendous struggle to get my first book published, and then it got a little bit easier, and then it got more difficult again. And as for access to major BBC programs, it seems to me to be diminishing. I get on less than I did 2 years ago. I feel a very strong narrowing of the spectrum of acceptable thought, and it leaves me very much out in the cold. I hope it doesn't get any worse than that. That's the real worry, is that if we move on from that to a genuine active intolerance of dissent, which I think may not be all that far away.
It might be my sort of search for like a Hollywood ending, but I just think you and people like you, but you predominantly have created a vestige of hope to turn this round in the final reel. That's what I think.
Not in my case. I have no such hope. I don't expect anyone to come over the horizon to rescue me at all.
Well, I was going to ask that. Yeah. So you're pessimistic about the future.
No, realistic. I look at the disposition of forces. I can no. Where is it? It's like Winston Churchill's question to was it Gamelin? Où est la marche de manœuvre? Where are the reserves? And Gamelin replied, aucune, there aren't any. At that moment, Churchill realized the French were beaten. There was nobody coming, and he had to then magic an American rescue for this country out of thin air.
But you could,
selling us to the United States.
You might not agree wholly with the Melanie Phillips of this world, or even Nigel Farage. But do you not see any correlation between your
Nigel Farage, absolutely none at all. No, Nigel Farage has expressed a desire to decriminalise drugs. I have nothing in common with Nigel Farage. And I never have. Melanie loves, as far as I can see, interventionist wars, and I hate war to such an extent that I find this an impossible bridge to cross. And it's a cross. And also, I had to say that in 2010, when it seemed to me that we had an absolutely unbeatable opportunity to destroy the Conservative Party, and I'll come on to the reason why this is so important in a minute. Yeah. I appealed to a number of other newspaper columnists and commentators to join me in what I believe to be an absolutely justified appeal to people not to vote for David Cameron's Conservative Party. And Melanie was completely uninterested and brushed me off. And I don't forget that, I'm afraid. The point was that we have actually spent in this country the past, very nearly 10 years, saving the Conservative Party at the expense of Britain.
Agreed.
That's what it's all been about. That's what the referendum was about. It was an attempt to save the Conservative Party at the cost of the country. And what we now face, a long and messy, and I think a lot of people will find very disappointing semi-exit from the European Union, is not what people like me were seeking for. Because I recognized that the objective which I had was an orderly departure from the European Union under a majority government which had stood for Parliament on that basis, would involve a political revolution in this country in all kinds of areas which need to be changed. But as it is, all we've got is a pseudo exit from the EU. Undertaken by a Conservative Party which remains egalitarian, socially liberal, opposed to the idea of personal responsibility, weak on national borders, poor on defense, clueless about crime and justice, and worse than useless on education. And nothing has been transformed.
I'm just listen. I'm to my dying day. I'm going to say, yeah, it's definitely not right yet, but it would be way worse had you not.
It's not even moving towards being right.
You don't think so?
It's not moving towards being right. Nothing has happened that suggests to me that anything good is going to come out of any of this.
See, somebody like you, for me, you have been a really bold, brave, lone voice. I mean, dealing with just being, sent to the peripheries of broadcasting, as you say, that no major shows on major broadcasters, etc., being frozen out. But from that position, you have managed to influence the debate. Like I said, for me, you were a lone voice.
How have I influenced it?
You've made it possible.
And I constantly hear debates about all the subjects in which I'm interested. I hear them on the radio. I see them on the television. I attend them sometimes. I don't get the impression that anybody I'm listening to has been even slightly influenced by the points that I'm making. And people who even supposedly my allies will come out with all kinds of stuff about the war on drugs has failed or whatever it is.
But when if you're going to deal with the micro, I totally take your point. I'm just saying on the macro, if you like, of you showing that it is possible to take on this liberal establishment, the broadcast establishment, if you like.
This is when I was a Trotskyist, I think it was Herbert Marcuse who came out with this phrase "repressive tolerance," which at the time was actually false. What he was saying was that the wicked bourgeoisie allowed us to speak out from the left because they simply wanted to destroy us by not giving us the not dignifying our activity with a reply or response. That greatly underestimated the strength which the 1960s left would have once they left university and went out into the professions. But what we have now is a sort of repressive tolerance. Yes, I can say it, but there's no echo. It's like being a man without a shadow. I can say it, and maybe a small number of people in a room might applaud or pay some attention. But that's it. I've said it. No reply comes back. It's as if I hadn't. It's as if the water closes over my head. It's as if I hadn't said it. The one thing I might claim to have done, and this may be the justification for it all, is that some people who I have addressed at some universities may have understood from me the unwisdom of fooling around with drugs. And I suppose I could say that if I've saved anybody from that, then my purpose on earth may have been fulfilled. But it wasn't what I was intending to do mainly. I mean, I'm glad if I put anybody off drugs, but it wasn't my fundamental purpose. My fundamental purpose was to stop what I now see as a very, very real and imminent possibility, which is the legalization of those drugs. And we have a prime minister who's appointed aides in Downing Street who are in favour of legalisation. And I believe the Conservative Party is rotten with legalisers. So it's just waiting for the opportunity when it thinks it can get away with it, but it hasn't happened yet. But it will come, I think, at the moment. I don't think I've managed to rally a counterattack to the immensely skilled and extremely well-funded propaganda of the legalizers, which has been going now for 30, 40 years.
Yeah, exactly. And the way we've gone recently in politics, we've got a semblance of some kind of libertarianism coming through, and hand in hand with that goes drug decriminalization or legalization even. The Adam Spliff Institute. Yeah, exactly. So, but what is your objection and resistance to the libertarian argument of just the
well, it doesn't
state?
exist. You can't. Libertarianism is an incoherent word. And Karl Marx, as so often, was correct. He said, no man fights freedom. He fights at most the freedom of others. There are many freedoms, and they conflict with each other. And in any civilized society, a large part of what government does is to negotiate the conflicts of varying freedoms. You can't make a principle. I think a lot of people who can't bear the intellectual surrender, as I think they see it, of believing in God or accepting Christianity, try to construct absolute moral systems out of something or other, and libertarianism is one such attempt. They say, all right, let's make liberty the watchword. But it doesn't work, because if my liberty conflicts with yours, who is right? And to that you have to turn, it seems to me, to the moral fundamentals, and for that you need a religious position. It's an attempt to avoid religion, as so many intellectual exercises are these days. People really, really don't want to actually accept the possibility that there might be a God, and so they do an awful lot of things to get out of making that acceptance. Yeah, I'm not, but you're one of those interviewers who agrees with me. I mean, it'd be more fun for me if you disagreed with me more, frankly. But I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm stating it as an argument against the whole idea that there can be even such a thing as libertarianism.
I'm just more interested in your position in the world of politics and culture. I mean, as I said, for me, huge influence.
I don't know what. I'm not there.
You say that. It's extraordinary.
I'm a fringe person. I don't have any. I have no influence.
But since
I don't get invited to. I mean, the one moment when I thought that I might have achieved some sort of entry into the amazing world of influence was I got a. I can reveal this now because it's of no importance. It doesn't put anybody in any kind of fix. Someone else disclosed it in a magazine, but I got a feeler from Clarence House to see what if I were invited to talk to the Prince of Wales, would I blab? And I said no. And I was then told by the intermediary that I could expect an invitation within the next few weeks, and none ever came. Oh, and I later found out in an article by Tristram Hunt in, I think, Prospect magazine, that what had happened was that Charles's then advisors had discovered that he was anxious to talk to me, and they'd simply told him, if you talk to that man, then and it ever comes out that it will do you terrible damage. And so the invitation never came. And I thought, oh, well, in that case. My opinion of the Prince of Wales fell a bit because I thought it was a bit gutless, but I thought, okay, right, well, there we are. But he was interested in the abolition of Britain, my 1999 book. That I was told, and he did want to discuss it, but he was just his advisors, who were of course highly political and well to the left of me, didn't want that to happen.
I'd still maintain, you see, I think that you're not factoring in the effect social media has had. I think that your position has...
You have to quantify this alleged effect. I mean, all I do is entertain.
I've tried to quantify it.
I don't change anything. It's not. There's nothing I do makes any difference.
I'm not saying you're getting the outcome that you expressly set out to achieve. What I'm saying is that your presence has. I think it's added to. Look, you have shown.
It's added to the gaiety of nations, but that wasn't what I set out to do.
No, that's a different thing, though.
It's like telling someone who goes off to make an expedition to the South Pole that they've increased the readership of boys' comics or something. It's nothing to do with what I wanted. Sure, it's nice to have people who enjoy listening to me speak or have arguments. Okay, great, but it hasn't made any.
Well, it might not have yet, but I think it's more like, maybe.
Well, wait, and it's not good. Well, there's absolutely no reason to believe that it will.
I think you found the little hole on the Death Star. I really do. I think you found out how you demonstrated how you can take on establishment broadcasters with patience and with, you didn't lose your rag. You kept to your brief and your wicket, and you were unswervable and were able to deal with all incoming. And I think that was hugely instructive for the next generation of opinion formers, if you like, coming in with an unpopular establishment argument, and that being able to atomize through social media. I think I think you are the patient zero of the shift in politics in the UK, myself.
Well, you think that if you like, but I know it to be false.
Gosh, it's extraordinary. Well, it's and that's the humility is it adds even more to the legend. But
it's not humility. I'm absolutely not suffering from any sort of humility or false modesty, but I am extremely realistic.
It's extraordinary. The number of people I talk to.
It's just. I've said at the beginning.
Yeah.
I might as well not have said it. It has had no effect at all.
See, the thing is, all right, I will argue with you.
It's like being a ghost. You're standing on the bridge of a ship, next to the steersman, and he's steering the ship towards a rock, and you're steering the ship towards the rock as loudly as you can, and you're surrounded by people who are chatting away about how bright the sunshine is, or what fun the party that evening is going to be, and the steersman continues to steer the ship towards the rock, and you say, look, you're steering towards a rock, and again he cannot hear you. It's like being that. It's like you're present, but only as a ghost. Nobody hears what you say.
Listen. Even extending that analogy,
I think possibly the moment when the ship strikes, and maybe I will cease to be ghosty, and I'll be able to say, okay, I told you so.
No, listen. I think it's like, yes, fair enough.
As we gurgle down towards David Jones's locker, but that's the only point at which anyone will hear what I say.
It's a shame that you see.
Hitchens is right. Hitchens is right. They'll say as they go down.
Many people say Hitchens is right now. Look, the machine that we've got.
Well, no, not many people don't, and nobody of any significance in politics or power does.
Well, as you've just said yourself, that the Prince Charles, floated the idea of meeting with you, and then was shot down. I think that does give exactly.
That was the end of it. And in any case, if I had any conversation with the heir to the throne, it would be completely overlaid with the fact that he's become a total what can one say, zealot in the climate change cult. So which would occlude any chance whatever of getting anywhere with them or anything else, but it's not going to happen. And the fact was I got one of those intimations that maybe somebody in a position of authority or influence might be interested in what I said. That's the only one I've ever had, and it was shut down.
Even if it's just me, you've had an enormous influence on. You've had an enormous influence on me, but like I said, not just the content of what you're saying.
It's sweet of you to say so, but how much influence do you have over government policy on education, crime, foreign policy, or anything else we care to name?
Oh, less now than I've ever had. Absolutely true.
Well, you haven't got any, and so it doesn't. It's nice that I've persuaded you, but it doesn't make any difference.
Well, you see, you say that, but don't you think, even if you don't like?
Look, I mean, here's another thing. I spent ages and ages and ages campaigning to try and save the good name of Bishop George Bell.
Yes.
The late George Bell, Bishop of Chichester, died in 1958. And to this day, people ring me up and say, "Well, what about this Peter Ball you were speaking out in favour of? Look at him; he was a terrible paedophile." I say, "Look, Ball and Bell are two different words. They're two different people in two different eras, and the level of consciousness of people who actually think they've read what I've written and heard what I've said is so poor that they think that I'm a defender of the grotesque paedophile criminal Peter Ball." That is an actual instance. I mean, I remember once seeing a survey of British opinion in which it was revealed at the height of the Troubles that 13% of the population of the United Kingdom believed that the Irish Republican Army was a Protestant organisation. That's one person in 8.
Yeah.
The level of misunderstanding and profound ignorance is enormous. The other thing is people in my position, people think they know what I say. And some of them are people who hate me, and some of them are people who profess to admire me, but they don't actually know what I say. They don't actually notice what I say half the time. If you can mix up Peter Ball and George Bell, than which there could not be two more different people, then think what else you might be able to mix up. Gosh, that's dispiriting when that happens.
But I totally understand how exasperating it might be for people not to get
you. It's worse than exasperating. I mean, anyone who could think that I would spend 1 nanosecond of my time defending the reputation of a four-letter man like Peter Ball. Anyone could even think that. I mean, what is it? You know, how could they be so wrong?
But that's the world we live in. I mean, look, how many people...
They probably think they're readers of my column.
How many people are as precise or assiduous and correct as you are? Very, very few. But that's the mind you're converting.
That's not being assiduous, is it?
You are, though.
No, I know, but if a misunderstanding so profound can be actually quite alarmingly common in my experience, then what?
Yeah, no, I get it.
What do you think? It's like one of those Far Side cartoons, the Gary Larson ones, where you have the owner of the dog saying one thing, and you don't have the explanation of what the dog thinks he's saying.
Yes, quite.
It is not the same. You just think how much of what I'm saying is actually getting across?
I think a great deal. I think a great deal.
Yeah, well, maybe. But you can't produce any evidence.
Well, I can. I'm just about to. I don't think that and it's not just you. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, but I'm saying I think a combination of you and the occasional people like you, and then social media coming along, I think did get the Brexit vote through where it wasn't predicted, and Trump getting elected.
Of that.
No, I'm not saying you.
But I wasn't in favour of that. I was against the referendum.
I know you were.
Campaign it. I didn't vote in it. So
I know
you don't expect me to take any joy about that. It's been completely disastrous.
But you're breaking it down to just
achieve any of the things that I was hoping to achieve.
You're breaking it down exactly. Well, this is two separate discussions. I accept that you haven't achieved, in your eyes, you haven't achieved what you set out to achieve. I get that. What I'm saying is about the influence that you had and have ongoing. I'm saying did affect the change that made it possible for people to, if you like, go and vote in their own with their own conscience, as opposed to following what.
Well, I hated what they did, and I hate the consequences, and I loathe the fact that it's saved the Conservative Party. I strongly dislike the fact that it's elevated to prominence Al Johnson, who is a perfectly likable person, but is not in any way conservative. I was shocked and remain extremely shocked that Al Johnson and Michael Gove, people whom I would have assumed were against our leaving the European Union, in one case told me so at great length on one occasion, have become the leaders of the movement to take us out of it. But it obviously isn't the movement that I wanted, because if they support it, then it can't be the one that I wanted to happen.
So
it can't be, and it isn't. I mean, I never cared about. You may want to enjoy the tangy flavour of chlorine-washed chicken and hormone-fed beef and all that stuff. I never cared about trade. What I cared about was preserving our legal system and our national independence as far as possible. And these things have got to be pushed to one side by some frenzy about trade deals with Donald Trump. I care. It wasn't remotely what engaged me with the European issue.
Absolutely, but again, I'm sort of saying I think the difference is, our dispute is between particular policies or outcomes that you were seeking.
No, but you're telling me that I should be pleased.
No, I'm not.
I'm absolutely. I didn't want and don't like.
I'm not. You can be very displeased.
Okay, I thought that's what you said.
I'm saying that your presence has been a huge influence. They may be fellow travellers and they might not be voting for policies that you espouse. I'm simply saying that basically your presence and the combination of you and others like you and then social media started...
Who's like me?
Well, as I'm saying, the Melanie Phillipses of this world, the Toby Youngs...
Melanie likes war.
I understand. Now, there might be differences on particular policies.
Well, that's a big difference.
Well,
it's a huge difference.
I don't think there's.
I'm not in favour of these liberal wars.
I'm saying I don't think there's a huge difference.
It's a divide so profound that I can't really accept anybody who takes that view as long.
No, I understand, but you see, you're breaking it down to policy, and I get that. What I'm saying is that look,
it's much more than that. It's not just she likes wars and I don't like wars. It's a fundamental difference between us on our whole view of the universe.
Again, though, but I think, again, you could probably say that about Brexit voters. There's people come from the left and people come from the right, but they'll find some sort of common ground. I'm saying I think the very presence of you being able to take on establishment media so effectively for so long, I think created a chink in the armor, if you like. The Achilles heel of the BBC, for instance. And I think you showed you led the way on how to take them on.
You find chinks in the armor of your foes so that you can do them damage.
And I think I think it has done them damage. This is the thing.
But I haven't. I mean, and material damage. The point of finding a chink in somebody's armor is to be able to attack him through that chink.
We're talking now about the BBC being disestablished.
If you don't do it, I don't see any change. For instance, take the BBC. Has the BBC in any way become less keen on espousing and propagating the idea that legalizing drugs is a good idea? Something it does pretty much every day? No, it's worse than it was. Has the BBC ever? I mean, I do actually try. I don't sit waiting. I do actually try to interest the BBC in allowing me to make programs on these subjects. And I might as well have saved my breath. I go through the proper procedures. And I can't, I have made successful TV and radio programs for the BBC in the past. But there's one which still goes around on the internet about the European issue. And in terms of radio, I made one which actually got favourable reviews, I think, in 3 newspapers the day after it was broadcast. But the result of that was not that I was asked to make more programs, but that I was asked to make fewer. From 1, I went to 0 in television, and now I can't get. The friends of mine who've tried in the past to get me onto BBC Radio 4 have now given up.
Yeah,
there's no point. The answer is always no. I was once told to my face by a former controller of BBC Radio 4 that I would never present a program on that station. I proved that person wrong, but it was a struggle, and the shutters then came down again very quickly afterwards.
But for an organisation that's getting £3.5 billion of public money every year, to start now, openly saying, okay, we're going to move 3/4 of the personnel around the country. The audience is now starting to openly defy buying licenses. They're openly saying, okay, this might be the time for the end of a state broadcaster or a state subsidised broadcaster. I do think this is change. It might be slow.
I'm in favour of the BBC. I think it's an institution that's necessary. I don't want to dissolve it or abolish the license. I want the BBC to exist. I just want it to reform itself so it makes a much more serious effort to be the impartial organisation it's obliged to be by its charter and agreement. But I can't. It never happens. I do these things that other people never do. If I see a program on the BBC which I think violates this impartiality, I write about it. But what I also do is I go through the BBC's formal complaints procedure as an individual license payer. To make this point and to pursue it to the limits of my ability to get this considered. And what I find is a complete inability in the BBC even to understand that they've done anything wrong. And I pursue these complaints. I really do. I argue them very carefully. What you find once you get to the point with what's now called the Executive Complaints Unit, where you're actually in contact with the BBC official, which most complaints never reach. Once you get to that point, what you find is they simply, flatly ignore everything that you say.
I completely agree.
They don't reply to it. They become unresponsive. I mean, this is what happens to me in most of my arguments.
Absolutely.
But I may find an interlocutor, but that interlocutor is not listening to what I say. And if I rebut what they say or indeed refute it, they ignore it. And they don't attempt in any way to rebut what I say.
And I'm simply saying
there is no dialogue. It is. But I've established this, and I continue to show it every time I do it. I've established it by making the effort. I do try, and I can tell you that again. I was wasting my time.
I'm saying,
except in terms of the learning. The one thing I haven't wasted my time is I have learned that we in this country have a more iron-bound and total shutdown of free speech than you could conceive of having existed 20 or 30 years ago. There is no freedom of speech or thought in this country.
Agreed.
There is an appearance of it, but in reality, only some things can be said anywhere where anyone will hear them.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm simply saying, but for your presence, things would be even worse. And that might not be.
Well, I don't think that's not measurable. I don't know, but that's not. It's not much comfort.
Well, you've introduced these subjects onto the public agenda, and you've demonstrated a way to actually get your argument across without being completely smothered by the establishment.
What do you mean by the public agenda? What do you mean by the public agenda?
I'm saying 20 years ago.
Where is this document pinned up? Where can I see it?
Well, I'm saying I think you can see it in the results of the general election and the election of Trump. I think that these are subjects.
Why? A general election in which two parties of which I despised clashed and one beat the other. I'm supposed to take some satisfaction out of that.
No, I don't want you to take any satisfaction at all. This is not.
Well, then stop telling me I've made an impact. For goodness' sake!
But you have made.
It's exasperating.
I'm not even saying it's a good impact.
Every time you say it, you just make me more and more inclined to put the foot down. I mean, what? How many times do I have to tell you? I've been the one trying to do these things.
Yes.
I know how much effect it's had, and I can tell you nothing. And telling me repeatedly that I'm wrong isn't going to change my mind. If you give me an example,
I am giving you an example.
Telling me that I may have contributed to the victory in the election of Alexander Boris to Pfeffel Johnson is not going to cheer me up.
I'm not trying to cheer you up. I'm simply saying.
Nor is telling me that I may have contributed to the victory of Aaron Banks in the referendum.
All right,
which I didn't want. That's not going to cheer me up.
Fair enough. I am slightly saying that.
Just drop it, would you? I have not achieved anything. I know it. There's nothing you can say is going to alter my opinion on that. I know what I set out to achieve, and I can see exactly what happened.
Well, that's fair enough. I'll take that. For me, you've achieved a great deal in that area, but I accept your.
Well, I know what that means.
Well, the world was a different place before you showed how that you can take.
But it isn't. You could not identify a single material difference.
Brexit and Trump, I think I can, and I think God bless you for it. As I said.
Well, both of which I despise.
Yeah,
yes, thank you very much. Well, I keep telling you, what I said about Trump and what I can see you says, Trump is what happens when you, and indeed that referendum is what happens when you ignore people like me.
Quite.
I said it quite clearly. I said it soon after I published the Abolition of Britain. I said, the people I'm really trying to reach are the left. I'm trying to say, look, you on your own terms, by your own standards, you're failing to achieve what you wanted to achieve, and you're actually making things happen which are bad for you and for me. Can you not change your mind? And also, I said, if you don't listen to me, then there are people who are coming. Beside whom I am the sweetest and most harmless person you've ever seen, and I didn't envisage that they would take the form of Donald Trump or Aaron Banks, because I didn't know, but I knew something was coming if my advice was ignored, and it's come. That's the extent of my failure is the precise thing which I predicted, which is the decay of politics into demagoguery. Has happened.
Was there a point of no return, do you think? Was there a point where we could have...
Yeah, the point of no return was May 2010, when millions of supposedly patriotic English men and women voted for a party which despised them, against my pleadings.
Yeah, no, I mean, and
I knew it would be the previous autumn when I went to the Tory party conference to address a body called the Bruges Group. And I said, this David Cameron is not your friend, and the Conservative Party is not your friend. And I was heard in a silence so freezing that global warming was temporarily reversed. A number of people who were present have since apologized to me for the way in which they ignored what I said. But that was the point of no return. That's when I knew I'd had it. That's when I knew I'd been wasting my time. And that the result of that election. And then when in 2015 the Tories actually won a majority, well, just in case I'd had any lingering doubts. And now I used to be able to rely on Labour voters who I used to say they would rather tandoori their grandmothers and eat them than vote Conservative. That's gone.
Yeah.
The Conservative Party has now entirely taken over the mantle of Blair. The Conservative Party is now more or less run by the ghost of Alistair Campbell.
It's true. That's true. Any hope? Yeah, no. Listen, I agree with you. I'm just pointing out what the ripple effect of your presence has been, as from where I'm standing. That's all. It's not always necessarily to your.
Well, it's just the thing is you have to separate the temporal from the eternal. Mm-hmm. I mean, there is one of my guiding maxims is it's actually in one of, I don't like G.K. Chesterton all that much, but in one of the Father Brown stories there is one point where he says, and it struck me with the force of a blow when I read it, and still does. He says, we see the world like people looking at a tapestry from the wrong side. We misunderstand the importance of almost everything we do. I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting. But and then he says, what we do here matters somewhere else. And to that extent, yes, but that's not temporal. And I don't know, in the eternal measures on which I ultimately rely, I don't know where I am in the balance of that either. We're all haunted by the writing on the wall, aren't we? Mene, take all you fasten. You were weighed in the balance and found wanting.
I think G.K. Chesterton said it better than I.
In terms of the temporal, we've discussed this. In terms of the eternal, who knows? But there is obviously another effect which our actions have, which is measured in a different way on a different scale.
Yeah, and well, listen, and I think.
Yeah, well, just stop saying that, would you? I mean, it isn't. No, it isn't going to get you. No, I'm happy to talk, but I just wish I could get it across. People laugh, you see, when someone says, "Well, what should I do?" And I say, "Well, get out." And they say, "Oh, where should I go?" As if no, I don't care where people go. If they can't make their own arrangements to get out, they won't succeed anyway. But it's the laughter which follows. People genuinely don't. There's a great moment in one of the Le Carre books. I don't know which one, maybe the Looking Glass War, but where the man who has this vision, he's a member of the Secret Intelligence Service, he's seen the driver of a car, a stupid little man, the stupid little car nearly crushed between two lorries. And they haven't, fortunately this hasn't happened, but it's incredibly close, near collision. And he sees, looking out of the back window of the car, this is in the days before seatbelts, of course, the faces of the children laughing and smiling, and thinking it's all great fun.
Oh my word! Yeah, well,
and the peril in which we find ourselves at the moment is particularly economic. I have to say.
No, I'm with you completely, but I'm just
the complacency about it's so great that it sometimes.
But take you out of the equation, and things are even worse. That's all I'm saying. I think you've got to give yourself some credit for at least being brave enough to be.
No, nothing.
Oh, I think speaking up is huge. I mean, as I said, you can tell me that you've had no effect, and that's absolutely fine. I'm just saying, but.
Well, I say I might have had some effect on a few minds about the issue of drugs.
Yeah.
But that's about the only measurable thing I could come up with.
What is the future for that? Do you think we are now hell in a handcart, complete liberalisation now in the West?
A huge amount of money has been spent by very rich people over a very long time to buy the minds of commentators and indeed buy the minds of the public. And the cleverest trick of all is the pretense that marijuana is some sort of medicine, which of course creeps past all the defenses of the human mind when they see they're being told that some poor suffering child cannot be treated for his awful complaint unless marijuana is legalized, and after that they're anybody's. And that's been the principal disaster. I mean, if we had a robust commentariat of intelligent, skeptical people capable of seeing through that sort of thing, then we might have some hope. We'd have nothing of the kind. The other terrible consensus one sees is people are so gullible now over attempts to get them into wars. I'd spent a great deal of effort a few weeks ago, which was the culmination of many months of research. I was offered contact with people inside the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons who came to me and said, "Look, you must know that the OPCW has been suppressing vitally important details of its investigations of the alleged poison gas attack at Douma in Syria in April 2018, and basically the British, French, and United States governments attacked Syria on the basis of false pretext." It's a huge story. It's exactly as big as the weapons of mass destruction. And I wrote it, and I got it in the paper, and I since then the BBC haven't touched it, the Times hasn't touched it, the Daily Telegraph hasn't touched it, the Financial Times hasn't touched it. Nobody has. It's as if I haven't written it. It's just the water has closed over it. And if you went, if you took a poll of members of Parliament, they'd be unanimous in believing that the barbarism of the Syrian government was such that some kind of intervention in that country was justified. And you'll find similar views about Iran, that somehow or other Iran is the only villainous country in the Middle East apart from Syria. When this standard, if applied to our ally Saudi Arabia, would require us to declare war on them tomorrow. It's nonsense, but people's minds have been completely captured by this drivel, and there's no fighting it. And time was. When I wrote that story, I so wished that the great Tam Diel, that great independent-minded member of Parliament, was still around to draw it, and he's gone. There is no equivalent of him now. And I'm haunted by the fact that if we had the level of journalistic integrity, I should mention there that Robert Fisk of The Independent has followed the story to his great credit. He's a proper independent-minded journalist. But if we had had in 2003 the level of understanding of war and politics and diplomacy and the awful consensus and conformism of thought in these matters that we have today, if we had had those in 2003, then probably the fact that there were no weapons of mass destruction would now be unknown. Extraordinary. Ponder that. And this is the level of decay. I said the decay, which, I'm not a nostalgist to the 1980s, but by comparison with now, the 1980s were a time of free thought, open dissent, and generally functioning adversarial parliament, and that's all gone now. We live in a soft totalitarianism where any one view is really permitted.
I still want to thank you for your shining a light on this, because I think without your voice, I think things would have been a lot worse. And I really do thank you again for taking time.
Oh, they will get worse.
And they will get worse.
Yeah, they will get worse. You may rely on it.
Well, you've been right so far, and I've no doubt that you'll be right again. But for today, I just want to thank you so much.
Well, this is the curse of Cassandra.
Yes.
Always to be right, never to be believed.
Sobering. Thank you so much for your time today. So I genuinely appreciate it. Thank you.